We're going to talk about sowing seeds now for your flower borders next year. I'm here with flower grower Sue Oriel, who with her partner Stephanie Bates runs Country Lane Flowers. And they grow all the flowers for the events they do, the weddings and for the flower stall outside in the lane. They grow them in their own gardens. Sue's garden is middle-sized, it's 1 acre. And she is now sowing her seeds in autumn for the following spring. It's Alexandra here from the Middle-Sized Garden YouTube channel and blog. And I'll put links to Country Lane Flowers and any other resources we mention, plus flower names, in the description below with timestamps. And if you're new here, the Middle-Sized Garden uploads weekly with tips, ideas and inspiration for your garden. So if you'd like to see the videos, when you open up YouTube, tap the subscribe button. And if you'd like YouTube to tell you when a new video is uploaded, tap the notifications bell. You don't have to plant all your seeds in autumn for the following summer, but there are a few flowers that really benefit from being grown in autumn. And I don't myself grow very many flowers from seed, but it is so useful to just have a couple of trays with maybe just 2 different kinds of plant, or even just one, to use to fill gaps. So Sue, what flowers should we be sowing in autumn in order to have them, better in the spring and the summer? And why does it make it better? Which ones do we need to sow and which ones shouldn't we sow? And what are the advantages?
Well, you've got 4 different types of plants that you can sow by seed. We break them down into their various categories. So you have got perennial flowers, biennial flowers, which are the ones that grow year 1 and flower year 2. You've got hardy annual, which will go through a British winter, and in fact anywhere around about our zoning of 8 or 9ish. And then you've got half hardy annuals, which will not go through the winter at all. So of those 4 sorts of plant seeds, the ones we're doing now are hardy annuals, because you are giving them a better chance of getting a good strong root system going by the time you plant them out after frosts in April next year.
And am I right in thinking that they'll often flower about 6 weeks earlier?
Some will and some won't, and it really all depends on what happens to them between sowing and flowering in weather terms. Because if it's really, really cold and they've planted out, they won't. They'll just get more established in the ground. They won't necessarily flower any earlier, but you will get a definitely more hardy plant, a bigger, bushier, healthier plant if you've left them in situ for longer.
So Sue, talk us through how you store your seeds and how you remember to sow the right seeds at the right time of year.
Okay, so as you can see, I've got this high-tech shoebox, which is very important for me, because what it has allowed me to do is make a sort of card index month by month. So again, highly sophisticated, tells me what's in each month. I have filed the seeds across the year, and you'll see from this that there's a big batch of stuff in the spring. All of those are spring sown flowers. Coming through into the summer itself, there are much fewer. So in July, I'm doing almost nothing, in August ditto. When it comes to September, which is where we are now, with this great clutch of things that I should be getting on with. So for instance, we've got marigolds, which are not the French marigold, the calendula, this sort of thing. And then the most important one for us is larkspur. Larkspur is an interesting, slightly tricky one to germinate, but it just likes a week in the fridge before you put it back out again. And then we carry on. Here are cornflowers of various different types. And then the other biggie for this time of year are your sweet peas. So this is absolutely critical to get these ones going. You can leave them to January, but you will regret it. They'll be much better and bigger plants if you do it now. Then you'll see I give myself November and December almost nothing.
So when you sow your seeds now,
Yeah.
and you sow them, we'll go into this, you sow in the propagator and then you put them somewhere like a cool greenhouse once they've actually germinated. Do you actually plant them out in autumn, or do you wait until the spring before you plant them out?
You can do both. So if you sow seeds for hardy annuals in, let's say, the later end of the summer. Those, if you've got a greenhouse and they've grown to a decent size, yes, you can plant them out. So things like cornflowers can be planted out. People plant out Ammi majus, any of the Ammi groups will do. Daucus, same thing. But you wouldn't plant out, say, a cosmos, because it's not going to make it through the winter. So you really do have to choose, make sure they're hardy annuals that you're planting out. Yes, they will survive happily. They will flower much the same time, but they're stronger plants, bigger, stronger, and that's the main thing. So, for instance, a cornflower that you've planted in outside in March, as opposed to a cornflower that's gone in as a seedling in around about October, will not ever get to the straightness and the height that your earlier sown one will.
One thing I think we just ought to explain is what an annual is.
An annual plant is one that grows and flowers within 1 year season.
So if you plant the seed in autumn, it will then flower in either spring or summer, and then by the end of the summer it will die, it will have probably grown its own seed which you can then harvest, and it's over. It's all correct. The entire life cycle takes place within 12 months.
Exactly that.
So Sue, talk us through how you actually sow seeds, particularly at this time of year.
The way I would do it now as a professional grower is to be incredibly sparing with the seed and to put them in individual modules per seed, possibly 2 if they're not strong germinators, but if I'm pretty sure they'll germinate well, I will put 1 seed per module. In the past, when I was doing amateur seed sowing, I'd get the packet and I'd sprinkle it all over a tray of compost. I'd end up with 400 seedlings, and I think, oh no, what am I going to do with all of those? But of course, now as a professional, you want to be sparing with your seed because it lasts a great deal of time when you properly protect it, keep it in a dark place, keep it cool, and therefore you can use it year after year after year. Never mind those sow by 2022 things people write on seed packets. That's almost entirely irrelevant if you're looking after the seed. So 1 seed per module. Seed compost is absolutely critical. The seed itself has got all the nutrients it needs in its tiny little seed packet, in the thing itself, and it will grow perfectly well in a well-drained, which is what seed compost is all about, massively well-drained soil with almost no nutrients in it at all.
Show us how you plant hardy annuals.
Right, well the first thing you need, if you were a professional grower, you'd take a 15 by 3 modular seed tray and you fill it up with seed compost, not potting compost, seed compost, smooth it all off and then give it a little knock down to make sure there aren't any giant air pockets within the soil. And then in this particular bed, I'm going to sow Oriel grandiflora, or the white lace flower. In order to get it going, I will simply make a mark in each of these. You don't need to do a tray of 15, you can do some in a pot. 15 plants will do me very nicely for the season. So I'll just pop these into the top like this, 1 by 1 by 1. Usually the planting depth of a seed is about the same size as the seed. Things very rarely need a lot of depth. So that's them in there. And then in order to cover them, I will just, it often says sprinkle over, but you don't need to sprinkle over. You've got plenty of compost there. Just muddle them in like that so that they're under. And then just give them a little shake down. Then the next thing to do is always put a label on. You think you will remember, but you won't. And then water the seed tray from the bottom like that, so that the moisture is brought up through the soil. And I'll leave that in there for about 10 minutes and then I'll notice it's looking damp on the top. I will take that out and pop it into a propagator. These are sweet peas and these are Oxford blue. You don't need, with sweet peas, all this faffing about cutting them and soaking them and splitting them. It's all nonsense. All you need to do is make a nice deep hole for a sweet pea seed. So about 1 inch down, and I put 4 in one pot in each corner. Drop one in like this, right down, literally no wastage at all. I will get 4 plants from that. Pop it down and again in here, and then I will water that from the bottom and put that in my cold greenhouse. And there we are.
Sue, I know that you grow a lot of dried flowers. So how many of the seeds that you're planting now in autumn will you be actually drying next year?
Almost nothing. In fact, nothing. And the reason for that is because you don't need to get a jump start on flowers for drying. They can take the whole season to grow and you can harvest them in September. So things like straw flowers, which is Bracteum, or let me say Statice, Limonium, those kind of flowers, they germinate very readily, and I will sow those in April next year, planting them out in June, and they'll be good and floriferous by the autumn. So you get the little plant going in the one module, and then when it's a good size and the roots are starting to fill the module, you will move it on either to the outside if it's the right time of year and the frosts are over, or you'll move it into a bigger pot in regular potting compost which has got nutrients. If it's not big enough to move on, and it's starting to look a little bit yellowish over the winter because it hasn't had any nutrients, we'll simply feed it. So you just take a regular liquid feed and just water them with those until they green up. And that's how we do it. And they'd stay in a cool greenhouse. If they're too hot, they go leggy, and you don't want a leggy seedling because they've got no strength when you come to plant them out. So keep them tight, compact plants, well fed, ready to be moved on after hardening off, which is the most critical part of this whole process before planting out. If you go straight from your cold greenhouse, even though it's cold, to a flower bed, the thing will have a shock and it'll stop growing, and you'll find they'll just sit there sulking like mad. So harden them off. And that means taking your seed tray of little baby plants, either putting them in a cold frame with the lid down so it's warm and warms up, and then putting them in with the lid up so that the cool air blows across them. If it's a lovely sunny day, you can just put them outside and leave them, anywhere you like, just for a few hours the first time, and then you can increase that amount of time. But it doesn't take more than a week to harden anything off. You don't need to do this for months on end, absolutely not, complete waste of time. So about a week of hardening off. The other thing I would say, if you do sow more than one seed and you feel you need to thin them out, don't prick them out until you've got at least one, if not two pairs of true leaves. If you move a seedling that's only got its seed leaves, which are always little round things and don't have any characteristic of the finished plant, it will just completely stop growing. It goes, nope, I'm not growing. I'm just going to sit here, and you'll wonder what on earth is going on. They'll just sulk, and then they'll just do nothing. So have a little patience before you prick them out. Look for the true leaves, and if you recognise, you'll easily see the difference between the leaves, and that's the point to move them on, not before. That's really important.
And one thing you also said is that when you've planted the seeds, you really need a heated mat or a mini propagator or something like that to germinate them. And then as soon as they've germinated, they then need to be somewhere frost-free but cold and light. Is that right?
That's exactly right. If you leave a seedling in an overly warm place, and especially you can have two issues. One, they can grow incredibly leggy, and the other thing, it's the ideal conditions for damping off. Now, damping off happens to a lot of growers, mainly amateur grower, because they are leaving them in too wet a condition. And this little virus that's in a lot of the soils that we get, sometimes it's on your seed trays from the previous year, which is why you should always wash your seed trays when you've finished using them. The seedling will it looks like it's snapped off at the soil level. Instead of having a straight stem, a tiny little baby stem, it'll just go in like that, and then it'll curve in and snap at that point. You've had it. That will never recover. And that's called damping off, and nobody wants that. That's bad news. So once you've germinated the seed, take them from the heat mat or the propagator and put them somewhere cooler with maybe a lid on if it's in a greenhouse in the middle of the winter, just to protect them slightly, but make sure that there's not a build-up of condensation on the inside, because they don't like that either. I'm making this sound awfully complicated, but really it's not. Just don't over-fuss them. They are tougher than you think, these hardy annuals, which is what you're sowing at this time of year. They are called hardy for a good reason, and they do make it through the winter without you fussing them too much. I've got some seeds I can show you later which have been just germinated in a propagator, and they're just the right stage to move somewhere cooler, and you'll see if I leave them there much longer, I'm going to have horribly leggy plants, and even though they're absolutely tiny, that's when you need to move them.
And if somebody hasn't got a greenhouse or a cold frame or even a potting shed, what would you recommend that they choose a coolish room in their house, use a heated propagator and then, or a heat mat, and then take them away from the heat and have them on something like perhaps a cool windowsill? Would that work?
I think if I was doing them inside, I'd probably put them, if I hadn't got a propagator either, you could do it in a kitchen, somewhere quite warm and somewhere nice and light, because most seeds do need light to germinate as well. And as soon as they pop their little heads up in a warm kitchen, then I'd move them to a cooler but sunnier windowsill, maybe in a spare bedroom or a porch, or even the window in your garage, somewhere like that. If you're going to move it to an outbuilding though, do watch out for mice, because they just love a little munch through things, especially things like sweet peas, which is another thing you'll be sowing at this time of year. So.
And I gather the mice have munched a few of your seed packets.
Yes, aren't they sweet? But I noticed today that they've actually eaten their way through a packet of larkspur, which I have bad news for them. Those are poisonous. I would say the other practical thing about it is if you're moving a seedling from potting it on, i.e. from the point whereby you've just germinated them and there are lots of them all together, never touch the root. Always pick the seedling up by the leaf, very gently. You can, and then move it on. Use a pencil. You don't need one of those dibber things. That's a complete waste of money. Or even your finger. Make a little hole. Drop the seedling into that with a little root further down, because you're holding it like that. You've made a hole like that, and then you just gently push the soil around it. Don't mush it in like that. It doesn't like that. It likes to have air and water getting to the roots. So don't firm them in as if it was trying to hold a flagpole up straight. You just want it's a tiny gentle thing. And that would be the other thing I would say. The other thing is, don't ever water it by spraying the top with water. This is a disaster. Always water your seed trays by putting them in something that you can soak like that. So they go in and the water will rise up through the thing. Don't water from the top. That's another super way to encourage this damping off, which we talked about, which is the rotting at the surface level of a seed stem. And I think with those two tips, you're good to go.
So if you're interested in having beautiful borders, see our Beautiful Borders playlist at the end of this video, and let me know what flowers you grow in the autumn for the following summer. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.